In this video, we're going to review the DataHub WebView configuration options, and I'm going to illustrate how we can use some of the settings to control how DataHub WebView starts up and how we can use an automatic login. I'm also going to show you how we can use the hyperlink controls for navigation and how the combination of startup settings and these hyperlink buttons can allow us to create a home page and a menu system for our operators so that our users who only have access to run mode can go back and forth between different pages that they have access to. I'm also going to show you how we can use some of the page background properties to interact with the HTML host. So if the DataHub WebView application is being hosted within another HTML page, or if it's being hosted within SharePoint, how we can actually make it look like the application is seamless and fits into your portal solution. I'm also going to illustrate how we can use Internet Explorer's kiosk mode to, in effect, lock the users or operators into the browser and not allow them to navigate to a different URL. Because we're going to be changing the settings in DataHub WebView, I'm going to use the local host version of Cogent DataHub as opposed to the cloud server. So first thing I'm going to do is launch the Cogent DataHub. And of course you see the icon appears down here in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. We're probably going to use our simulation data again, so just very quickly I will launch DataSim and DataPid, and I'll just move those down to the bottom of the screen. And I'm now going to look at the properties for the Cogent DataHub, and in particular I want to work with the WebView options. Okay, so we've got the Cogent DataHub properties dialog up, and I'm going to specifically navigate down here to the WebView tab, and I'm going to start by noticing that I can select the data domains that the user has access to, and I've got other options here for startup, whether we want to start in run mode, etc. For the time being, I'm just going to clear all of those checkboxes, and I'm going to launch DataHub WebView in the browser, and I can of course just click this button to do that, and it will launch an Internet Explorer session. Just maximize that, and you can see of course that by default it's pointing to my local host server and the DataHub WebView.asp page. The settings, let me just restore this again. The settings that we specify inside the DataHub WebView configuration panel are actually being injected into the ASP page. So the values that we set here once we hit apply are going to impact this particular page. So at any rate, I'm going to log in here, and my password is admin, and I'm going to hit connect, and you'll notice a couple things. One, we're not starting in run mode. The admin account of course has access to design mode, and secondly, we are not starting with a default start page, and again that's because of course I had cleared those options in the DataHub WebView configuration panel. Now I'm just going to quickly flip back here and turn on start in run mode, and I'm also going to indicate that I want the Cogent start page, which is actually this page over here. I want the Cogent start page automatically loaded when I start. So I'm going to hit apply on that. I'm going to navigate back to my browser, and I'm just going to refresh that ASP page, and of course it will ask me to confirm. And now you'll notice that I still, of course, am confronted with the login screen, but this time I start in run mode, and it should automatically load the start page, and there it goes for me. We'll come back and we'll talk about some of these settings a little bit later, but for now I'm going to explain what I mean about a home page and a menu system. Of course, if the operator is in run mode and does not have the ability to switch to design mode, there's really no way to switch between pages. So what we need to do is add hyperlink buttons to each page and provide the user with the opportunity to, of course, click a particular button and under the covers load those pages. So for the next thing I'm going to show you in this demonstration is exactly how to do that. So I'm going to close out of that page, and I'll just start a brand new page And I'll just change my background color here to powder blue, something I'm a little bit more used to. And I'm going to notice down here on the bottom of my control toolbar, I have a hyperlink button, I have a hyperlink image, and a hyperlink text. So I'm just going to add a hyperlink button to, actually I'll add a couple hyperlink buttons here to my form. And I want to set these up so that the first button will navigate to a particular page, and the second button will navigate to a link outside the browser, for example, the Microsoft.com site or Google or something like that. So I'll select the first button here, and let's pretend that this is going to load some kind of a page, and you'll notice that I have a drop down that allows me to select from among any of the pages that exist within our system. And you'll recall that demo 4 is actually the gauges page. I'm going to also set the text and the link for this guy, so let's just call this, for example, the Microsoft website, and in this case I'm going to enter a URL, www.microsoft.com. And when determining which of these URIs to use, you'll notice that there is a checkbox here. So by default, that checkbox is off, meaning that if I have a page URI selected, then the URI will actually refer to that, whereas if I want an external link, I need to indicate that I want to use the HTTP URL. So there's my page. I've got it set up here. Let me save that, and I'll just call this nav demo, so that when I navigate away from this page, I can still come back to again. And you'll notice that when I now go into run mode, and I choose, well, I'll start with the Microsoft website. When I click on this button, what you'll notice is that it automatically opens up a second browser instance and navigates away from Data Hub WebView. When I click Load Page, you'll see that it will go ahead and load the circular gauges page. So of course the key is I need to provide a mechanism for getting back and forth to that home page, and of course I haven't done that right now. What I would really need to do is add a button to this page that would allow me to link back to the nav demo page, which is listed there. Okay, the next thing I'm going to illustrate is how we can modify some of the background, some of the properties of the page to seamlessly integrate with our hosting page, which of course in this case is really just an ASP page. And I'm going to start by noticing that the options for page here, I mean obviously I can set the color of my background, and that's currently set to yellow-green, and I've got control over the width and height, but it's this property in particular that I want to highlight right now. You'll notice that the in run mode property defaults to use both, and I have two other choices. I can use the page color, or I can use the HTML background. And to make this a little bit more clear, I'm going to open in Notepad the ASP page. So you will probably recall that in order to work with the web server, you'll see this is the location of where that file is stored. And I'm just going to hit copy on that, and then I'm going to launch Windows Explorer, and I will navigate to that address. And then I'm going to navigate specifically into the Silverlight folder. And in that folder, I should find the Data Hub WebView.asp page, which is right there, Data Hub WebView.asp. And that's the file that is being used to produce the HTML that, of course, is then rendered in Internet Explorer that includes the Data Hub WebView application. So you'll notice that this is really a very, very simple ASP page, very simple HTML page. The init params setting of the Data Hub WebView Silverlight control host. So maybe I should just back up here. You'll notice that right here I have an object tag, and the object tag is referencing the Silverlight control, and it requires the ZAP file, which is the source of the application to run, and we can also provide a little bit of configuration by specifying the init params. And in this case, you'll notice that the init params are being set using an ASP code snippet, and it's getting the value of those init params from the variable called init params, which is being set back up here on line 8 of this file by making a call to WebView init string. And this is a piece of server-side GammaScript code that is actually grabbing the settings that we have specified here and injecting those into the HTML that's returned to the browser. So that's really what this is doing. The other thing I want you to point out is that right now the background of this page is white, and this is what I'm going to change right now just to more clearly illustrate what I mean by a seamless integration with the surrounding area. So I'm going to hit save on that, and I'm now going to minimize and return to this page. And I want you to notice what happens when I hit refresh. Of course, it will prompt us again for our login, but look at the background of the browser as we do that. First of all, the entire page goes red before the login screen loads, which should obviously be expected because we just set that color. And now when I log in, I still have Data Hub WebView. But what's important to note, and I'll just finish waiting for my start page to load here. And again, I'll navigate back to the page that I was using, and I will exit. And I'm going to again return to the page properties and remind you of this in run mode option that we were talking about. And right now you'll notice that it's set to use both. I'm just going to change this and suggest that I want to use the HTML background color. Well, in design mode, this area that is not covered by the drawing surface is always white. However, you'll notice that when I go into run mode, because I've set use HTML background, I should see red as the background of this page, because that was what was set inside the HTML. You'll also notice the yellow-green background is gone. It's using exclusively the red, which is probably a little hard on the eyes right now. I'm going to go back to design mode. I'm going to change the background instead. I'm going to change the in run mode option instead to use page color. This time, this yellow-green background should be used for the entire page, and the red is not shown. And of course, finally, if I return to the default setting, which was use both, and go into run mode, you'll see that I've got both the red of the HTML background as well as the yellow-green of the page background. So this in run mode option can be used to make it look like your page is part of, say, a portal site. Okay, I'm going to go back here to use page color and just show you a couple other options that we need to be aware of. Notice that when I go into run mode, of course, I don't have that white edge anymore because I've said use the page background. But if I'm focusing on run mode because I am thinking about my operators, there's a few things that I may not want. For example, I may not want the menu bar to be made available. I may not want the user to be zooming in because we've already set zoom fit. So let's pretend that I don't want those on there. So I'm going to turn those options off. So from the page menu, I'm going to set run mode option of use kiosk view. And now when I go into run mode, you'll notice that I no longer have either the menu bar, the toolbar, or the status bar at the bottom of the screen. Of course, I've still got my taskbar here for Windows Explorer, but of course we can set that to auto hide or not show it. So I'm not going to worry about that one right now. I still need, as a designer, to navigate back to design mode, and you may recall that to do that I can press Control-Shift-R on my keyboard, and that's a toggle, so I can go back into run mode again with Control-Shift-R and come out again. So that's one option. And the other thing that you'll notice is that because I'm using Internet Explorer, I still have the ability, if I want to say view full screen. So now when I choose the full screen mode within my browser and press Control-Shift-R, I have really a full screen view of the page for the operator. Now, this is maybe in some situations still not the best solution for a couple reasons. One, you'll notice that if the user ID, if the credentials I'm using allow for design mode, then the user still has the ability to use Control-Shift-R and get back to design mode. The second thing is, and I'll just jump back to run mode again, the second thing is that because I am using full screen mode in the browser, I can still move my mouse to the top of the screen and the user has access to the browser and can change to a different URL. So I even want to change that option. I'm going to hit F11 there, and I'm going to do something a little bit different here. So first of all, I'm going to navigate back to Data Hub configuration properties. I can set start in run mode, and I can set kiosk mode properties here. So I don't have to do it from within the designer. So maybe I want the user to start the ASP and be locked in kiosk mode right away. Well, I can do that. You'll also notice that I can disable the design mode, which means even if the user ID I am using has permission for design mode, Control-Shift-R and the design mode are going to be disabled entirely. So I'm going to apply those changes, and let's refresh this page again. There's the red. We're still going to have a login screen. There's my login screen. And of course, it's going to start with our start page again. But the difference this time, you'll notice, is that I'm already in kiosk mode, so I do not have those controls on the screen. And I'm going to press Control-Shift-R on my keyboard, and I'm doing that right now. And I cannot get out to design mode. I'm restricted. I have to use run mode. Now, just one further illustration. I want to use Internet Explorer's kiosk mode, and this is a setting of the browser itself to actually launch the application and not provide this area up here at the screen at all. So I'm going to go back here one more time, and the kiosk mode for Internet Explorer really has nothing to do with these settings. So I'm actually just going to turn those back off again and hit apply. And I'm now going to close this browser instance. I'm not going to bother saving my changes. And on my desktop here, you'll notice that I have a shortcut to Internet Explorer. And I just want to review the properties of that. I'm just going to pop that into Notepad for a second so you can maybe see that a little bit more clearly. So you can see that all I'm doing is launching my Internet Explorer and specifying the -K or the kiosk setting, and then indicating what the pages that I want to access. So now, let me just close this guy. And so when I now launch that browser session, you'll see that I am in full screen mode. There's my red and admin, and my start page loads. Here it is. And I can't get out, so I can't press F11 to escape Internet Explorer mode. I can't move my mouse up to the top of the top of the screen. Now, I did turn off, you will probably recall, I did turn off disable design mode, and I hit apply to that, which means if I do hit Control-Shift-R, you'll notice that I can exit back to design mode. So I'm going to just do this one more time here. I'm going to close this guy, go back to my Data Hub configuration option, and obviously this time if I also disable my design mode and hit OK or apply to that, and now launch my kiosk mode again, all of those options working together should keep me locked into the home page and the menu system that I have set up for the user. And so I cannot hit F11 to get out of Internet Explorer mode. I cannot press Control. Well, I can press Control Shift R, but it does not exit to design mode, and so of course I'm in effect locked into this application. I'm going to hit Alt F4 to get out of Internet Explorer there. And the next thing I want to do is modify the DataHub WebView.asp page to enable an automatic login. I'm just going to go back here and change my background color to white because red is getting a little hard on the eyes. And when I come back to init params, you will probably recall that this init params is being injected from the DataHub configuration properties. We've talked about that before. One of the properties that is not available, one of the settings that we have purposefully not put on this page is the username and password credentials. We've decided that for security reasons, if you really do want an automatic login, then you're going to be forced to apply it the way I'm doing now. So you need to consciously go into the init params setting and indicate username equals admin and password equals admin. And that just makes it a little bit more clear that those credentials are being specified in clear text in the page. And you'll notice the syntax for this is to concatenate those parameters with a comma or with commas after the init params section has been added. So, and now I can also do other things here. So for example, I could say start in run mode equals true, and whether or not the setting has been specified here as start in run mode, it's going to override that because it basically is going to be echoing or setting the value to true after it was already set here to false. So there's kind of an order of those parameters, which also means I could just list all of the parameters I want here directly within init params, and I don't need this server-side piece of code. So let me hit save on that. And there is a separate document available on our website that indicates all of the different init param settings that can be specified. So I'm going to minimize that. And I am going to launch DataHub WebView in a browser. I guess we can just use our kiosk mode here again. I'll double click on that. And this time you should notice that it bypasses the login screen and navigates directly to the start page that we have selected. So there you have it. We in effect have a turnkey kiosk type solution that we can run for our operator. Just a couple final options while we're talking about this, and I can't really show you because I'm locked into design mode here. So let me close the browser and let me turn off disable in design mode and kiosk mode, and I don't need to load a startup page anymore, and I don't need to start run mode. So I'm going to apply those settings, and you'll probably recall that I have to be a little bit careful because I have specified start in run mode here, and even though I turned it off here and I hit apply, because I am now adding a start in run mode option here, you'll notice that when I do launch Internet Explorer this time, and I'll launch it not in kiosk mode, I'll just launch it using the DataHub WebView and Browser button there, you'll notice that this time it actually will start in run mode, even though in the configuration screen I turned it off because I'm overriding that in the actual init param string in the ASP page. But I do not have a start page configured, so that is working correctly. Just wanted to illustrate one other thing. Right now I'm running on a monitor that is using a 16:9 ratio, and because of that, if I know what kind of a monitor or the resolution of the monitor that I'm going to be targeting, it's probably a good idea to set the width and the height appropriately here. So, if I change this to say 1280 by 720, I'm going to get the same 16:9 ratio as my monitor. So of course now when I go into full screen mode, and I've specifically changed, excuse me, when I go into run mode, when I specifically set this to 75%, and I will go into run mode, and I'll use Internet Explorer's option here, you'll see that the page is in the same ratio as my screen, which also means that if I decide that I want to, and I'll just go back to design mode here, if I do want to use zoom fit, and now go into run mode and again use full screen mode, of course it's going to take the full extent of the page. So just something to consider. We might want to actually pay a little bit of attention to the width and height properties when we're designing our pages initially. The final thing I'm going to do is just let me come back here to Cogent Data Hub properties. I want to just talk about a couple of the other options that we've really ignored up until now, and that is disable data rights from client, show page information icon, and the data domains here. So to do this, I'm going to illustrate that I'm actually going to turn off DataPID and DataSim, and of course we've used these before. In fact, you know what, I'll just leave on DataSim. I'll just turn off DataPID. And I'm also going to notice these options: disable data rights from client and show page information icon. These are options that can be forced here, but they can also be set in the browser, and it's a little more convenient to show them to you in the browser. So I just want to leave those off, but I am going to make mention of it that they can be set here. So let me refresh this page. And of course, we've still got the automatic login set inside the ASP, so that's why we're seeing what we are. And I'm going to go back to design mode. And I'm going to add a gauge to my screen. Give me a second here while my controls load. So I'm going to add, I'll add my simple radio gauge here. Of course, you've seen this over and over, how I can use my point binding and type in something like PV. And you'll notice this time when I type in PV, it's actually not being recognized. I don't see any options drop down here. If I type in capital data, you'll see that it does list a number of options, but it only includes data sim. It does not include data PID, and that's because I have, back in the configuration settings, I have turned off the data PID data domain. And so any new bindings are not going to be able to see those data point values. Now, if I do open up an existing page, I'll go back to my circular gauges here again. Data PID, of course, is still running on the system. And if I look at these controls, go into run mode here, you'll notice that I can change SP, and I do in fact see my values for MV and PV moving. And that's because when we disable the data domain in Data Hub WebView configuration properties, what it really does is prevent us from creating new bindings, but it does not prevent us from working with or seeing existing bindings. So you can see here that my needle value for this gauge is in fact bound to data PID PV, but I would not be able to create a new binding for something unless I'd already had access to that data point. The other two options that I indicated I wanted to show you was this idea of let me just jump back here, was this idea of disabling data rights from the client and showing the page information icon. So here is the page information icon, and you'll notice that in run mode right now that icon is not displayed, but I can change that setting. So I'm going to go back to page and I'm going to choose run mode options, and I'll turn on show page information. And now when I hit run, you'll see that the page information button is available, and I can click that button to see information about that page, and that might be something that you want to make available to your operator. I'm going to turn that off again. Run mode options, show page information. And then the other button that I want to illustrate is this make data points read only button, which is the same as the option that can be specified here, disable data rights from client. So when I click this button, make data points read only, and I now go into run mode, you'll notice that I still see the PV values and other things changing, and setpoint auto mode is still configured, so every 5 seconds that will change, and I'll just wait for it to move. But you'll notice that as I move this gauge around the screen, it's actually fighting with me. You can see that I'm trying to drag this all the way over to say 90 or 100, and it's actually not moving. The changes that you're seeing here are because auto mode is set. And in fact, maybe I can just illustrate a little bit more clearly. I'm going to go to the Data Hub properties window, and I'm going to open up the property that controls the auto mode. So here is my auto mode setting, and you'll see it's currently set to 1. I'm going to change that to 0, and I'll go back here to my page, and you'll notice that now this set point will no longer change every 5 seconds. But as I drag my needle around the screen, you'll notice that it's just not going. It's moving from the gauge perspective, but those values are not being written back to the Cogent Data Hub. And so you can see very clearly this radio gauge here is bound to my set point, this marker is bound to my set point, and this gauge is bound to my set point. And even though I move these controls, or if I change this marker and try to move that, it's resisting, it's going back. So we can actually set pages up that are purely for illustration that prevent the user from actually interacting or changing those data values. And I'm just going to make that read write again, and I'm going to notice that when I go back into run mode, of course, I can now change my set point, and that does immediately change the PV and MV values. The other thing that I will mention, and I'm just going to go back to Cogent Data Hub again, and I'm going to change this back to 1, change auto mode back on. So you can see that every 5 seconds again my set point is going to start changing. One final option that is available only in design mode is this suspend data point updates, and when I turn that on, you'll notice that I no longer see any animation at all from these controls. That only impacts design mode. When I go into run mode, I see that my controls update correctly. But in case you are interested in working on the design of your page and you really do not want to see data point updates here, you can click this option and turn them off. So in this demonstration, we've reviewed a number of different things. We've discussed the Data Hub WebView configuration options that allow us to configure in effect a home page and a menu system. We've talked about hyperlink buttons and how to navigate to other pages as well as to websites outside of the application. We've talked about how we can use page background properties to interface with our HTML host container, and I've also illustrated how we can use Internet Explorer's full screen view as well as kiosk mode to create an application that in effect gives operators the full screen and kind of locks them into run mode.